Alright, good day guys, and welcome to my channel. Today we'll be discussing an interesting course titled Plant Anatomy and Physiology. And I'm the course lecturer Ohiaba Emmanuel Enemaduku. So the first topic under discussion is the plant cell. As you can see, this is the plant cell. This is how a plant cell looks like. So the question is, what is a plant cell, or what is a cell? A cell can be defined as the structural and functional unit of life. A cell is known as the structural unit of life because cell contains structure. As you can see inside the diagram, we have several structures like the Golgi body, the ribosome, the endoplasmic reticulum, the nucleus, the chloroplast, etc., etc. All these structures can be called the organelles of the cell. So what is an organelle? An organelle can be defined as the subcellular structure. So all these Golgi body, cytoplasm are known as what? These subcellular structures, and they are called organelle. So that's why we say the cell is made up of what? Structure. And also the cell can also be defined as what? The functional unit of life. Simply means what? Each of these organelles have specific role to play inside the cell. And that's why we say what? The cell can fully be defined as the structural and functional unit of life. So let's look at the organelles in the cell. We have the first organelle we'll be discussing is the cell wall. But before we discuss that, I want you to understand that all living things, including viruses, are made up of cell. But we're limiting our discussion to the plant cell. So let's look at the organelles inside the cell. We have the cell wall as the first organelle under discussion. The cell wall, this is what gives shape and rigidity to the plants. All right. Now you can see the plant cell has a well-defined shape, and it's because of the presence of this cell wall. So the cell wall is made up of what? Polysaccharide, cellulose, pectin, and hemicellulose. The cell membrane. The cell membrane, after the cell wall, the next organelle you meet in the plant cell is the cell membrane. And the cell membrane is known to be semi-permeable, or it is selectively permeable. That means it allows certain materials, certain ions to go into the cell. That's why we said what? The cell membrane is semi-permeable. So it is made up of layer of protein, fats, or lipids. The next organelle is known as the nucleus. The nucleus is known as the control center of the cell because it is vital in the area of transmission of traits from parents to their offspring because of the presence of what? The DNA in the nucleus, which is known as deoxyribonucleic acid. This is the information code that helps offspring to resemble their parents. So inside the nucleus we have the nucleolus and we have the nucleopores. The function of the nucleolus is to manufacture cell protein producing structures and ribosome, while the function of the nucleopore basically is an opening or a hole, okay, and the essence of this hole is to allow proteins and nucleic acid to go out from the nucleus into the cytoplasm. Another organelle is known as the plastid. It's an organelle which also has its own DNA. So basically, plastid is divided into three types. We have the leucoplast, we have the chloroplast, and we have the chromoplast. The leucoplast, this is the non-photosynthetic tissue in plants, and basically they store proteins, fats, and starch. While the chloroplast is the photosynthetic organelle in the plant cell containing DNA, which is responsible for photosynthesis because it contains the green pigment called the chlorophyll. You know that chlorophyll is essential in photosynthesis because if you look at the chemical equation of photosynthesis, you see carbon dioxide, combining with water in the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll to produce glucose, which is the manufactured food in plants. and oxygen is given out into the atmosphere. The chromoplasts, these are other pigments present in plants apart from the green pigments. Have you ever noticed some flowers? You see the flowers. Have you ever noticed some flowering plants? You see a flowering plant, you see the leaves having different, colors. For example, there's a plant we call, Codium variegatum. If you look at this plant, the leaves are of different color. You can see yellow color, red color, and other colors. So these colors are called the chromoplasts. All right, these are other pigments. And these colors are very, very essential, or these pigments are very, very essential because they provide, the helps in ripening of fruits and flower. Next is the central vacuum, okay, where all the waste products are stored. Okay, so its function is for storage and is to sustain Turgor pressure against the cell wall. The cell vacuum contains, sap, which is a mixture of salts, enzymes, and other substances. We have the Golgi apparatus, also known as Golgi body. It is found in eukaryotic cell. When we say a cell is eukaryotic, it means that cell is well defined. It's well defined in the sense that the cell, the chromosome is not naked. That means the chromosome is covered by a nucleus. But the prokaryotic cell, you can see that their chromosomes, the cell chromosome is naked. It's not covered by what? By a nucleus. And that's why we say a cell is prokaryotic. That means it is primitive, absence of, nuclear covering on the chromosome. But eukaryotic cell is known as advanced cell because these cells has their, chromosome covered by nucleus. So back to point. Function of Golgi body. It's responsible for the distribution of synthesized macromolecules to various parts of the cell. Not just synthesized macromolecules like lipid, proteins, etc. Not just that. It distributes newly synthesized macromolecule. Take note of that. It distributes newly synthesized macromolecules. Ribosome. Ribosome is known as the protein factory of the cell. Protein factory in the sense that it is responsible for, protein synthesis. The mitochondrion, also known as the powerhouse of the cell because it controls respiration. Lysosome is another organelle in the plant cell. The lysosome, you can otherwise call it the suicidal bag of the cell. Why? Because it digests, foreign, bodies which might be dangerous to the plants. And it also digests worn-out organelles, food particles. So let's look at other plant cell type. Under this other plant cell type, we have the collenchyma, we have the parenchyma, and we have the sclerenchyma. Collenchyma. The collenchyma is a hard cell which primarily supports the plants. So let's look at the anatomy of a collenchyma. If you type online and you look at the anatomy of the collenchyma, you discover that the collenchyma, the cell wall are thin. They are not thick. The cell wall are thin, and there is no intercellular spaces. Absence of intercellular spaces. So the next, cell type we're looking at is the sclerenchyma. The sclerenchyma is also known as the stone cell because it gives mechanical strength to the plants. This is very, very hard. Why? Because of what? The presence of hardening agents. The hardening agents, these are complex polymer or hydrocarbons or substances that are present in the sclerenchyma. And it's these substances or polymer that makes the sclerenchyma to be hard. And what are those hardening agents? We call them lignin, cutin, and and suberin. Some plant anatomists believe that the cell wall is made up of lignin, while others are saying that the cell wall is made up of lignin and suberin. So those are the arguments in the area of plant anatomy. Next, we have the parenchymatous tissue. But before going to the parenchymatous tissue, let's look at the anatomy of the sclerenchyma. When you look at the anatomy of the sclerenchyma, you discover that the cell wall of the sclerenchyma, discover that the cell of the sclerenchyma are very thick and there is absence of intercellular spaces. So that is why the sclerenchyma is very, very strong. Next is the parenchyma. The parenchyma is known as the packing tissue. All right, that means it can expand, it can shrink, it can expand, it can shrink. When it takes in water, sap, and other minerals, it expands. And when it distributes those sap and minerals to opposite cells, it shrinks. So that's why we call it the packing tissue. All right, and why it's able to do that? Because their cell wall are very thin and there is presence of what? Intercellular spaces. So with this, you should be able to differentiate between the sclerenchyma, parenchyma, and the collenchyma. The next cell we're looking at is the xylem cell and the phloem cell. The xylem cell is responsible for the transport of water and mineral salts from the soil via the roots to the stem and to the branches of the plant. While the function of the phloem is for the transport of manufactured food, or is for the translocation of manufactured food from the site of from the site where the food is being manufactured, which is the leaf region during photosynthesis. Then those manufactured food, which is the starch, will now be distributed from the leaf to the branches, then to the stem, and that is all. So by this, you'll be able to also differentiate between the xylem cell and the phloem cell. Thank you so much for listening. And in the next episode, we'll be discussing more interesting topics. Stay tuned. Please share this information and subscribe to my channel. Thank you. Have a wonderful time.